Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. The podcast that talks about human development and psychology to help you maybe figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to be talking about George Vailliant, factors in emotional health. And of course, he's a scientist that was, studying this. And emotional health has now been integrated into psychology because people figure out that your mental state does affect your emotions, and trauma does affect your emotions. So, your emotional state is as important as your mental state because the two are connected. Head and heart are connected, and it's an important part of your life. So, whereas before they neglected it, it's now been included. What makes for positive mental habits in late life? Again, positive mental habits. There are too many negative mental habits that we can get into. And like I used to tell some of my coaching clients, if you feel yourself in a negative spiral, stop, take a step back, think of 3 positive things to overcome the negative thing. And if you can do that, it keeps you from emoting all over everybody else. According to 3 50-year prospective studies of lives, an important predictive factor is the use of mature adaptive defenses. So, mature adaptive defenses. A lot of people have immature adaptive defenses. And coping mechanisms, things that they learn coming up in bad situations. And we can all look, like my kids' generation calls them Karens and Kevins, adults behaving badly. You can look on the internet and there's just a plethora of them. So we know this is going on, especially here in the good old USA. But if we can be mature, and defend ourselves, it's going to be better for everyone, and especially you. So, and coping with problems. Problems are going to happen. Everyone's going to have a problem in their life at one point or another. I don't know anyone who's had the perfect life and never had a problem. Even Jesus had problems in his life. So, you're never going to not have a problem. But when a problem comes up, you need to learn to deal with it in a mature, adaptive way. Because like I say, there are too many Karens and Kevins in the world acting like big babies. I remember even our current leadership had a balloon made to look like them in a diaper by another country because they felt like he was acting like a big baby. So, if you want to solve a problem, you need to have some maturity. Now, you could probably solve problems without having some, but in the long run, that's not going to really behoove you, because you want to solve the problem completely. You just don't want to get it out of the way for now. You don't just want to, remove the problem, period. You want to solve the problem, So, Vailliant looked at the survivors of his own grant study of Harvard men born around 1920, as well as his study of inner city men born around 1930, and a subsample of women from Terman's study of gifted California school children born about 1910. So these were all people that he looked at from the beginning of, the last century. Excuse me. In all 3 groups, those who, in old age, showed the best psychosocial adjustment, and of course, that's your mental state and how you get along with others. Those are, that's an important thing in life, to be able to interact with others in positive manners. And, like I say, adjusting to being around others is an important social skill. We all know there's going to be people we don't care for so much, but you have to be able to kind of grin and bear it and, yes, smile and nod. That's what, I had a grandma whose father was English, and those things. just smile and nod, and know that you can walk away, and then when you walk away, you can say whatever you want. And, that's how I usually do it. Had the highest incomes. Of course, more money you have, the, easier life is going to be, the less financial trouble you're going to have, so that's going to be one less stressor on your back. And the strongest social supports. Again, if you have a positive social support system, if you have family that supports you, you have friends that support you, and, you feel like you're supported in the world instead of all the time being, knocked down in the world, then you're going to be able to be happy. You're going to be able to stand better in your own little world, and that's going to be a positive, and that's one less other thing off your back, is worrying about what other people think about you. Because as the saying goes, it's none of your business what other people think about you. There was a situation recently in my life where, there was, I feel like, an unhealthy relationship. People were a little too concerned about, keeping up with me, watching me. It's like, maybe you're concerned about you and what your life is like, because my life, I have a nice life. I like my life. I'm happy with my life. So if you're not happy with my life, you don't have to look at it, if it bothers you, but sometimes people, and like some of these people that watch these movies and shows all the time, and reality TV and stuff, and I think we got that problem here in the USA right now. It's too many people think our country is a reality TV show, and they like the drama. Like I say, I don't care for drama. I have a happy, smooth little life, and I've worked hard to get it there. And I don't like trouble in my life. I don't need that. So I got rid of that when I grew up. I said, enough trouble back there. I don't want it in this part. So if you have a social support system, and you're, living your life, as the saying goes, get a life. But if you're living your life, then you're not so concerned with what other people are doing in theirs. And reported the highest marital satisfaction and joy in living. So, like I say, it's been no secret. I've been married 3 times. Me and my husband, same man, married him 3 times. We're counting on the 3rd time being the charm. But the difference was there were problems in the first marriage. I asked him to go to couples counseling because I knew his problems led back to his mother. She's a narcissistic sociopath. And anybody that grows up with a mother like that is going to have problems with the opposite sex. He didn't want to go. He was trying to point his finger at me. It's all you, it's all you, it's all you. It's never all anybody. It takes 2 to tango, it takes 2 to fight, as they say. Second time, he was exhibiting other behaviors that were unacceptable. I said, no, I grew up with stuff like that. I am not accepting that in my children's life. Again, I asked him, go get some help, because I felt like he needed some help. He did go get some meds, but he didn't go to counseling and get his stuff figured out. So when he wanted to get married again, I'm like, here's the deal. Because one of my best friends was a counselor, and she said, he's got bipolar, he's had anger issues in the past, and you all have relationship issues. Just tell him, because I told her, I said, oh, I do love him, I do care about him. He was my high school sweetheart, we had 3 kids together. But I don't want to put up with his BS. So she's say, call him out. Say, you're going to have to go to anger management. You're going to have to go to bipolar skills training. You have to go to couples counseling. And she said, do it one after another. Don't throw that at him all at once. Just say, if you want to be with me, you're going to have to do anger management. And so that's what I did. I one by one, I said, okay, this has been a problem previously. If you want to be with me, do this. And he did it. And he called my bluff, as they say. Because I honestly didn't think he would do it. I really didn't. Because he had been so against it, previously. I thought, well, he's not going to do it. So we won't get back together because he's not going to do it. But he did it. One after the other. And we learned a lot of things. And we learned how to fight fair. And he said, yeah, I see why you broke up with me. I was being a jerk to you and to the kids, and you had every right to break up with me, and I understand that now. And he said, I just, I didn't know how to do this. I had no idea how to do this. I mean, look at my parents. He said, my mom, you called her the most selfish immature person you ever met, which that's how I felt about her. And he said, I didn't know how to be in a relationship with another person. He said, once we stopped being kids, and stuff got real, I didn't know how to deal with it. So, it's always helpful to get an outside opinion on things. And, sometimes that's what you have to do. Had to pause. My son came in. And joy in living. That's something that a whole lot of people don't have. A lot of people are just so unhappy with their life. And that comes from ungratefulness, honestly. Because if you were grateful for your life, you'd have some joy. You'd be happy. And that is part of changing your outlook. Because you need to count your blessings. Not worry about, and so many people are worried about what they don't have. I wish I don't have this and I don't have that. And so-and-so's got this. I wish I had this. But, if you have a roof over your head and you have food to eat and you have clothes to wear, and a little extra maybe even. If you're watching this, you have internet and you have a device to watch things on. There are people in the world who don't have internet, don't have a device to watch things on. So you're probably more well blessed, than you think you are. So at the end of the day, as you lay down in your bed to say your prayers for the night, count your blessings, and you probably won't be able to even count them all before you get done. You'll forget some. You'll say your prayers and then you'll be in the bed and be like, oh, I forgot that. But, that's a way to learn gratefulness, and gratefulness will help you have joy in living, because you got up another day. You get to live a wonderful life. You get to, have a pretty good life doing what you want to do, hopefully. And if you can't, the old saying, the life gives you lemons, make lemonade. There are ways to turn things around to, benefit you, and other people. So, joy in living is important for late adulthood, because you want to be happy with your life you've lived and the life you're living now, and maybe what you're going to do in the future. So, gratefulness is a big part of that, and it's something that you need to learn to count your blessings, so you can have a joyful life. For those who earlier in adulthood had used such mature adaptive defenses as altruism. Altruism is something that will help you in life. There are so many stingy, cheap people that don't understand that being altruistic and giving to others not only makes them happy, but it makes you happy too. We tithe, and my husband used to not want to tithe. He's like, I don't want to give my money to them people. But then he realized, he saw all these little certificates they give you and everything, and they try to invite you to their events and stuff like that. But he realized that it was making a difference to someone, that it was doing some good for some people. So then he was like, okay, do how you want, do what you want. And we've got more money now than we have ever had. And I'm not, 100% sure, but I do believe that tithing is important. And that God, like I say, God loves a cheerful giver. So, being altruistic, giving to others, thinking about others. If you're selfish all the time and it's all about you all the time, you're kind of missing out, because you're never going to be enough and you're never going to have enough if you're just me. So that can make your life kind of miserable to live like that. Humor. You gotta have a sense of humor. My dad used to tell me I laugh too much, but then he's realized that I've had a lot of bad stuff in my life, and you have to have a sense of humor about it, because if not, the alternative is being depressed about it all the time. And I did that for a little while, but then I got over that. I was like, I don't. Why do the bad guys get to win? I'm making my own life, and the bad guys don't get to win in my story. So, I learned to have a sense of humor about it, and you have to be able to do that, because stuff's going to go wrong. I mean, in a whole day, there's not going to be a whole day where you're probably not going to have something that goes wrong. So you got to have a sense of humor about it and realize life is funny. Stuff happens, and you just have to laugh and move. Otherwise, you're just going to cry and be stuck. So, suppression or keeping a stiff upper lip, you don't have to react to everything. You can just say, I'm not dealing with this right now because I got this going on and that going on, and I don't need this right now, and so I'm just not going to deal with it right now. And that is well within your right if you are going through too much, and stuff is coming, your way that you don't have to deal with. You can just be like, no, I'm not dealing with it. Just not. Anticipation or planning for the future. Me and my husband, we have plans for the future. They may never come to fruition. We don't know. But my son jokes that I have contingencies for my contingencies. So I like to plan. I like to have ideas. Well, if this happens, we're going to do this. If this happens, I want to do this. If this happens, I'd like to do this. So, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have hope for the future and a sense of direction, that helps your life, versus if you're just sitting there being depressed and thinking everything's happening to you, then you're, of course, going to be miserable. If you have hope for a future and make plans for your future, and think about what you're going to do and this and that and the other, that makes hope. And that will help you definitely have a better outlook in your late adulthood. And sublimation, or turning lemons into lemonade, like I said earlier. Life is going to give you some lemons, and, you might as well take it and do something with it. Like I said, I had some problems growing up, and I met other people who had similar problems. I thought, like, nobody's going to believe what I've lived through. This was terrible. And then I got into a support group and learned there were people who went through some worse stuff than what I went through. So, I decided to take that because it was so helpful to me to meet these other people, and write books. The first book was about a little dog. The little dog didn't feel wanted. Everybody would just reject the little dog. But eventually the dog found his forever home. And then, I had been writing poetry since I was a kid, and so I published a poetry book. And then I have a series called The Secrets of the Closet Monsters. And that is based on my life and 4 other women. Several of my coaching clients were older ladies, in their 70s, and even one in her 80s. And, they unfortunately didn't make it to see the publishing of the books. But I had asked them, I said, can I use your story? I'm thinking about writing a book one day. Can I use your story? And they're like, okay, oh yeah, as long as you don't mention my name. I don't want people to know that, just me and you know that, and that's enough. And so I didn't do that. I wrote it as a fiction series, created a main character and put all 5 people's lives into this character's life. So, it's a fiction series, but it's based on real events. So, I took those lemons that I came up with and turned it into lemonade. And, I wanted to go to college and get an arts degree, but I was never able to do that. But now I'm, doing art and selling art in galleries. So that's pretty cool. And, life is just going to hand you lemons, and the best thing you can do is go ahead and juice those suckers and put some sugar in it and make you some lemonade. Use of adaptive defenses was relatively independent of IQ. So, you don't have to be smart to use adaptive defenses. You just have to make the decision to take negatives and find some kind of positive and then flip it over into the positive category. Just think of your life as you have negatives, positives, and there's a column there. What you want to do is take these negatives, flip them over into the positive category, and use them for something positive. Because that way, you're going to work out your life for the positive. You don't want to end up with your life being all just negative. And so many people do that. And they get to the point where, they're in their 80s and they're stuck in a home because they hated on everybody in the world, and nobody wants to even go see them. There's a woman in the facility where my mother-in-law is who said her kids dumped her there, sold her house, took off with her money, and left her there, and they don't even come visit her. And we're like, well, one wonders what she was like as a mother. But, she might have been great. The kids might be crap. We don't know. But that's not how you want to end your life. You want to be happy. You want the people around you to be happy. So it doesn't take a genius to decide to turn negative things into positive. It's your choice. Education. You don't have to have a PhD to decide to make your life more positive. That's just, again, a choice. And parents' social class. Again, whether you was rich or poor coming up. Poor people are going to have more negatives. Let's just face the facts. Poor parents are stressed. They're going to take that out on their kids. And you're going to have a more stressful childhood than a childhood of a person who had, well-to-do parents, and there was not that kind of stress in the house. So, you might have a little more to overcome than someone who grew up with more money. But again, it's your choice to take those negatives and flip them over into positives and use them for something good. How do adaptive defenses work? Well, you have to employ them in order for them to work. It's the most important thing. According to Vailliant, they can change people's perception of realities they are powerless to change. So again, we all know perception. I've had discussions with some people about perceptions. It's like the old adage about the elephant. And you have 5 blind men around this elephant. And the one's touching the trunk, and he said, it's a hose, it's a long hose. And the one's at the side, and he's like, it's a big wall. And the one's at the other end, and he's like, oh, it's, there's maybe opening to a sewer area. It smells really bad right here. And the other ones are at the legs, and they're like, it's a big column. All of these men are looking at the same thing. But based on their experiences, because they can't see the elephant, they're describing it as something they're familiar with. So we all have our own perceptions of reality. And it's the same reality, but we're standing at a different point. It's like this person's standing here, this person's over here, this person's here, here, here. So what you see from your point in reality is not something that other people see from their point in reality. And I'm not going to get too deep into that, but your perception can be 100% wrong. Like the guys with the elephant. He was none of these things. He was an elephant. But this is what they perceived him to be. So your perceptions can be 100% wrong based on where you're standing and your life experiences shape your perception. So, the important thing when you're dealing in perceptions is to go with facts, not feelings. So many people are so deep in their feelings, how they feel about a thing, they don't look at the facts, and that's something I learned when I was coming up in therapy and going through, school, studying psychology, is facts will help you a lot more than feelings will. Because we all have feelings. We can feel any way about anything. But if you're dealing in facts, then your feelings, you're easier to push back a little bit. You can deal with them and not be in them and emote them all over the place. So when, you're dealing with folks, you need to keep in mind the facts, not the feelings, and that everyone's perception can be different about a same point in time, about a same event, because you were standing over here and they were standing over here, so they saw things you didn't see from that side. So for example, in the studies just described, the use of adaptive defenses predicted subjective physical functioning, even though it did not predict objective physical health, as measured by physicians. So we've all known people who are big people who are supposedly unhealthy, according to modern science, but yet they're out there playing ball, running around, and stuff like that, that supposedly, overweight people can't do. But because they feel like in their head they're perfectly healthy and fine, they're doing it. So, and we all know people who are trim, and are sick all the time. So, again, your mindset has a lot to do with your subjective reality. If you think you can, then chances are you can. It's like the little train. I think I can. That works for people too. So, that's what that whole story was all about. But, you can overcome a lot of things just by having a positive attitude, and a mature mindset, and thinking, before acting. Among World War II combat veterans, those who used adaptive defenses were less likely to suffer post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's because they realized what they'd been through. They thought about it. Some of them might have got help, but a lot of them did not. I knew a man, and he clearly had it. He told me that he was told, they told me I was shell-shocked. And then he did a bunch of abhorrent things. He ended up being a bigamist. He ended up being a molester, probably a murderer, from what I have uncovered. He just pushed it all back. And as we know, if you repress, instead of suppress, if you repress, stuff is going to come back up. And that's going to lead to abhorrent behavior because you're not quite ready to deal with things always when they come up. But he never received any help from anybody, and that spilled out all over into other people's lives, whereas if he did, maybe that could have been a different story. But there were guys who, came back, and they had, good relationships with their spouse or, parent or somebody, and they talked to people about it and said this horrible stuff happened. And then they, would belong to VFW posts. I knew a lot of WW2 guys, one of my neighbors across the street. They all belonged to VFW posts, and they go hang out, chat, and talk about stuff. And, that was a way for them to relieve that stress so that they didn't become, so stressed out. And I know from my own experience that me repressing things and just trying to move on and go as fast as I could was not helpful to my mental health. And so I had to look for help outside of, my support system, because I basically didn't have one. The family was 100%, against that. Don't talk about, stuff. Just pretend it didn't happen. And you can't really do that. It's gonna come back to haunt you. So, and then, friends, if they didn't come up in a situation where things were, then they don't understand. So even though they want to be supportive, they don't really know how, because they don't come from that. So that's why it's important to get into therapy or groups that have to do with a specific thing that you survive, so that you can take out your garbage and get help, some skills and tools to help you cope and deal with this, so you can, move on and get better. So, a lot of veterans who don't get help are the ones we see on the street, are the ones who commit suicide, and that's a shame, because they're out there defending our country, so, they should get the support and help that they need. But all too often, that's just not the case, and that's, very sad. So, I think they should teach, I know before that they were debriefed when they came out, but now all that's kind of gone away because of spending cuts on everything. So that is something I think needs to be brought back, so that our veterans can, become healthy and well adjusted again when they come out of the service, and not, depressed individuals with PTSD who end up, ending their lives or other people's lives. That's a whole shame here in America, I think. That shouldn't be a thing. Adaptive defenses may be unconscious or intuitive, because not everyone thinks about, how to do this. They just by nature do it. I'm a more positive person, but it didn't come to me intuitively because, the way I was programmed was to not think about myself in any positive way. It was all negative. So, like I say, if it hadn't been for one of my grandmas and one of my great aunts, and the teachers at school, my friends at school, I would have probably ended up in a very different manner, and I probably would not have lived past the age of 13, because I had a very negative, outlook, and I was being fed negative input all the time, so I felt like my life was pretty much hopeless. So if I hadn't had some people that were not doing that to me, I probably wouldn't have made it past the age of 13. So it's important to be good to folks, and it's all too popular here today to be negative and hateful and bad to other people, just indecent people in general, and I think that needs to change. That needs to change, and we're seeing here now what's going on when bad behavior is touted as being your individual right. No, it's bad behavior. Being an ignorant fool is touted as being yourself, and it's cool. No, it's not. Being hateful to others, with sexism, racism, and all that going on right now, is, self-preservation, me and my people first. No, that's not how it's supposed to be. And just doing whatever you want, again, not how it's supposed to be. So, stuff's going to happen. And your emotional health is as important as your mental health because it feeds in together. So, you have to be able to cope with things that are going to happen in your life, because things are going to happen in your life. If you can take the negative things that happen in your life and find any positive or flip them around for the positive. Like I said, some friends and I, we started a charity for, people, survivors of, sexual assault and molestation. And we ran that for 9 years. So we took the negative things in our life and flipped them around and did something positive with them. And if you can do that, your life is going to be so much better, especially in late adulthood, because you're getting close to the end years, and you're going to want to make that something that is not defining your life. Because we all have negative stuff that happens, and, you don't want that to define your life. So, if you can learn to take care of your emotional health as well as your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. Nobody talks much about your emotional health except for people in psychology. So, that's also important in your life. So, I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. So that's where I'm going to leave you today. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Until next time.